Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today is December 21st, 2021. Oh my goodness, it is the winter solstice, a very powerful day, a reminder of being the light or aligning with the light in dark times and trying to stay positive and move through, because summertime is the complement to this time that we're in. So I send everyone my sunshine from Southern California, first of all, if you're in a place where it's cold and dark and wintry. And also my inner sunshine, the light of awareness, the light of nourishment, the light of consciousness, to take you through times of difficulty, times of confusion, difficult marathons, grueling marathons of spiritual development, and know that you do eventually emerge into a summertime of the soul. So let me grab my sculpture over here too. This is still level 1, lesson 2, a continuation, because that initial recording was a 4-part recording that is so dense with information. I didn't want to be, I hope that Patricia has the proper link. I think she's got it and we'll tune in. If not, I'll send it to her. If I don't see Patricia come in, I'll take a moment and pause and make sure she comes in. I see your furry overlord is joining us for today. That's wonderful. You can see Cheeky is snoozing in the background there. Yeah, continuation of last week's presentation of level 1, lesson 2. I didn't even get to the advanced stuff. Don't worry, I will. What I'm doing is feeling like I don't want to have to rush myself in presentation, and I don't want to have to rush you, the class members and students, in terms of comprehension. Some of this is review for some of you, but it's a worthy review, because even like I'm very familiar with my information. I'm very familiar with this and embody it and paint it and think about it all the time. And going back over my lessons again and creating, notes for each lecture, I'm getting new perspective. I'm getting new ideas and looking at things in a new way, even as I remember what I already know. So I encourage everyone to dive back in, delve again back into the original recorded lessons from 2013 and 2014. It's all timeless, like an outfit that never goes out of style, and it very much informs the journey that we are on right now in terms of ascension. Many people have been contacting me, and I love having these conversations that are about the basic topic of ascension, personal and planetary, and what it means. And the answer is, it's all part of the map of time and everything that I've been drawing and teaching about for a very long time. So going back to these basic foundation lessons is worthy, absolutely valuable, time well spent, and I would encourage everyone and anyone to do so. And for anyone who might be catching this live lecture or recording of the lecture, who's not yet enrolled in the class, I encourage you and urge you to become a full-time participant, really enroll in the class, because then you'll be able to get behind the scenes, go on Teachable, actually go through the video lessons that I created back in 2013 and 2014, and know all of what I'm speaking about, even as I synopsize it and put it here in a live lecture format. But the live presentations and webinars like this are really wonderful because they do allow for Q&A back and forth, and also some more direct telepathic transmissions, mind to mind. So even while my mouth is speaking with relatively slow moving words, my non-mouth mind, my eye of pure insight that is non-verbal, is sending out information to all of you in a much more direct fashion. If you see me looking down, it's because I take extensive notes and I have them on my little tablet down here so that I can remember all the things that I want to get through in a particular class. So I've already gone through much of part 1 of lesson 2 and some of part 2. I want to do a little bit of recap as I jump back in, and I'm going to do a lot of drawing with the whiteboard. And anybody who's been in the class for a long time knows I draw with pictures. I talk with pictures and I speak with the drawings a lot, and that you're kind of learning my shorthand of how this is, what this all is. So let's go back to, and let me change this around to my face. There we go. Perfect. That looks a lot better. The idea of how did God or consciousness itself create the universe or the cosmos? And this is also the lesson in where I start to refine my language and what I'm even talking about. If I use the word universe, it has the prefix uni, meaning one. But when I am really speaking in this class to everyone, I'm really speaking about the cosmos, which would be the multiplicity or the multiplex of all timelines, all dimensions, all possibilities, all probabilities, instead of, let's say, this one version of the book. So I'm starting out here with this dot, and this dot review from last week is the zeroth dimension. Zero, not because it is worth nothing, but because it is worth everything. What does that mean? It means that this is the infinity point. Infinity, it is the overlapping nexus, or the place where all of these lines and vectors and forces all converge and go back to, but also all emanate from. So please understand that this is a circular journey where we are coming from the source, coming over here, emanating into densified matter. We come as pure potential, we come as light, we come as waveforms. That scribble is supposed to be matter. That's like your physical cellular body. And then we complete the circuit. We go back to the source, which becomes the destination. But none of that is the end of the journey, because then you circulate endlessly out again into a new form and then circulate back again. And you can see this beautiful, I'll change colors, a beautiful figure 8 pattern begins to emerge. And that figure 8 pattern is part of the creation of the torus field. And that is a rather scribbly torus, but I will highlight it so that you can see it better. Here's the top vortex, here's the bottom vortex, and you can see the apple core shape in the middle. Those are the basics of the idea of emanating from the source and coming back to the source. The review part that I want to get to is this idea of what is that initial momentum or motivation that causes consciousness that is here. Remember, this is all consciousness. And where I drew that box and everything where I'm scribbling out here, technically none of this exists. Can you just even imagine that, or even comprehend that, or envision what that level of being is like? Everything that can ever exist, that will ever exist, that has ever existed, exists in that little dot. And there is literally no comprehension or imagination of anything being beyond that little dot. I bring this up and emphasize this because these leaps of consciousness, these cognitive quantum leaps is a good word for it, are the types of leaps that bring you into a higher dimension and bring you to greater levels of freedom. So one question that can be asked is, well, like, why would God consciousness, again, like a non-anthropomorphic, purely abstract God of creation and creatorship, why would it even think? Why would it even want to expand itself into matter and dimensionality and all this stuff? And really the answer is greater degrees of freedom and self-exploration. So none of this is about like separating self from God as punishment, because I think that that is an ongoing theme in human mythologies and religion, and also an ongoing theme of this sense of human suffering, in that when you become, here's my famous stick figures, a person with 2 arms and 2 legs, you're supposed to have your beautiful crown, that I should be drawing that in purple, but you should have your crown, your halo, open to and connecting with, this divine source, this over here. You should be connected with that all the time. But it is only through genetic degradations and other forms of aberration, including the implantation of language structure, that seems to inhibit us, like cut us off from a direct connection to God or our own divinity or that zeroth dimension, and that our journey is all about a reconnection with that. So it might seem like you're in separation and you're in suffering, but none of that was the intention of this initial expansion into dimensionality. The expansion into dimensionality was meant to be a freedom in exploration. And I know I give the brochure the sense of go on a cruise, everything will be great. And imagine that I'm telling you, like, go on a cruise, everything will be great. And then the cruise turns out to be the Titanic and you sink down to the bottom of the ocean. So in terms of our journey into dimensionality, there have been consciousness catastrophes that have kept us mired down here in denser levels of consciousness, and struggling to return back to the reconnection with the divine, but it's not meant to be that way. So just please understand that these initial leaps are very, very positive. The first leap of consciousness of what if there was a part of me, God, over here, I'm speaking as God now, if there was a part of me that wasn't with me, but that was somehow elsewhere or else when. That is the first leap. Even having that imagination or surmising that or considering that is astounding or amazing or miraculous. It's a cognitive leap. And as soon as that thought is created, here's a dot that's over here that is God self, God presence, that is not over here with the initial first position of infinity and the zeroth dimension and everythingness. And that is a leap of 90 degrees or a perpendicular leap. Again, this is like the center of a dandelion seed head. You could leap in this direction. You could leap in this direction. You could leap directly towards the camera. You could leap directly away from the camera. You could leap at any degree interval. Any direction is 90 degrees perpendicular to the 0th dimension. And that's the creation of the first dimension. And the whole idea of this is that infinity doesn't have to think of anything else. Everything is at infinity. That's really big, because as you're moving back to infinity, you could consider yourself an inevitability particle, where you are moving back to infinity. It is inevitable that you will rejoin there. The first leap is the concept of something not being at infinity. And you, as a multidimensional consciousness, are making this leap when you are transforming Taurus into flying rainbow lasagna. Here, wait, I'll go back to my face. So as you do this leap from Taurus into flying rainbow lasagna, it is analogous to that first leap from 0th dimension into the first dimension. And then, of course, the leap from the first dimension into the second dimension. That would be making a flat plane. So first I start with a dot, I make another dot, I connect it with the series of dots in between, I have a line. That line needs one piece of information to say where there is a position of a number on that line. And then what I do is I go 90 degrees to that line. Here, I'll draw it for you. Yes, this is recap from last week. It is worthy recap. What is 90 degrees to the line is in this direction. You're lining up fingers next to one another on your hand, like I'm lining up my fingers like this, or you're lining up pencils on a flat surface, or you're lining up anything that is flat on a flat surface, and you end up making a plane, and it is two-dimensional. Now, of course, as I've been describing these, I've been using boxes and squares and lines, but what is really going on is something that is circular, where you start off with a dot, and then you end up making a hoop, and then that hoop spins around and creates a sphere. And then that sphere spins around and creates a torus. And then the torus spins end over end, kind of this direction, and creates the flying rainbow lasagna. So we'll get into that, but I start off with these simple flat planes that look like squares because it's just easier visually to see everything that's going on. Let's build up to a box. So we did the first 0th dimension, the first dimension, the second dimension. Here we are in X. We have an X over here and a Y over here. We're in the second dimension. But what we're going to do is we're going to build the third dimension, which is a box. That's what happens if I jump 90 degrees off of the flat plane and I stack up many time planes. Let me choose a different color so that it doesn't get too confusing for you. So now I'm going to stack up many of these planes, like playing cards like this. Many planes like playing cards, boom. Many planes like playing cards. And it's going to become a box. And we're very familiar with boxes. We live in boxes. Boxes are called houses or rooms. Here, I'm trying to draw a decent one for you here. And the box is the third dimension. And the third dimension, let's choose it like a very visible color. Here's a red dot. Oh, wait, let's make a stick figure. Here's the stick figure of you within the third dimension. That's you sitting in your room right now, and you are within a box, but you're not just a flat, static, unmoving object in your room. You are experiencing time. If you were a flat, static, unmoving object, you would be considered dead. You would be a corpse. You would be a thing that's just there, or even just a flash, there momentarily, but not there continually. What is perpendicular to the third dimension? The answer is time. And that means that you're making another box over here. That would be the box of the moment that you're going to jump into. And then here's the next moment that you're going to jump into. These become boxes or moments that are separated at the Planck length. And this whole entire vector becomes a timeline moving in one direction. But you didn't just appear in that box. You came from over here. So you have a series of boxes. So this is a tiny box in your past and a slightly larger box in your not so distant past. And then here's the box of yesterday that you just jumped out of. You know, of course, there are many, many boxes in between there, but that brought you to today in this moment. And we'll draw little tiny dots that represent you. Here's you yesterday. Here's you 10 years ago. Here's you as a baby. And then this is important. This is the body that you're going to jump into in another moment. And then you've got another body that you will jump into over here in this moment. And another version of self. These are all versions of self. So now I want to relate this to the time vortex that I'm drawing when I'm drawing the tori. This is that simplified flat cross section of the lower portion of a torus that I draw extensively in all of my paintings, with the idea that chronologically we're starting at year 0 down here and moving upward in age towards whatever, age 100 or age 1000 as we go upward, up towards the vortex point. And let's choose a special color. This is the path of least likelihood. I didn't quite do it right. I want to make it go through there, but not touching there. There we go. The path of least likelihood that continues onward into infinity. Let's also draw this same diagram from the top down. This is the path of least likelihood as seen from the vertical perspective. And here is the membrane of death and the surrounding, periphery seen from the top down. So you get, diagrammatically, you get what I'm doing here. So let's get blue for the blue timeline colors. Each one of these timelines that I'm drawing here is one of these rows of boxes, all right? So you have many, many, many little tiny time dots that all add up together, and they all converge here on the membrane of death. This black membrane is a flowing membrane. It is like a waterfall or a sheet of energy that, again, is flowing from the source of infinity over here down or outward and has a motion to it, so that you can understand these are all about trajectories and vectors. And also, if we're being super accurate, these are all spirals that spiral in 3 dimensions around here. But if I drew them as spirals, it would be very hard for you to decipher what I'm trying to say. So I just draw them as simplified lines, or like a lollipop. Here's the line, and then here's the dot at the end of the lollipop. And these dots over here, these dots over here are significant in that these dots contain the end result of all of the choices and aspects of the behavior and experience and everything that's added up to your trajectory to make you be in a particular position in time. So there's many, many, many timelines. What I just said was, this is the 4th dimension, this long blue timeline here. And if I said, class, what is perpendicular to a line, or what is perpendicular to the 4th dimension? You would say, Aurora, it's this direction, right? And you're correct. And that means that we would be adding up many, many timelines next to one another. And each one of these timelines represents a slightly different version of reality. So I'm scribbling on this version of reality here. In this version of reality, maybe you woke up 2 minutes later than today, or 2 minutes earlier. Or this version of reality, you stayed in your pajamas and drank coffee and decided not to do anything. And this version of reality, or the very, very far periphery, you never even got out of bed because, I use the example, a meteorite fell on your head or an airplane fragment fell through the roof of your house, squashed you in your bed, you died instantaneously, and you never, ever actually got anywhere. That is just time scale within one day. But this, what I'm drawing over here, is time scale, within your whole entire life. That the understanding that I want you to really embody and encompass is that as you are more towards the periphery here in the record of your life, like, an analog record, like on a platter, on a that contains a song, like an old-fashioned record from the 1970s. When you're in these areas of the periphery, you're embodying aspects of self that are not true to your character, or not as true to your life path, or that are really distortions of who you are as a person. And as you travel and journey closer and spiral closer to the central core timeline, which is the path of least likelihood, you become more and more aligned with your true self, your true characters, who you really are as a person, your characteristics, your true behavior patterns, the true events of your life, until at the point where when you're actually spiraling on this timeline here, you are completely in alignment with who you are as God, divine presence. So understand and encompass the truth that this timeline here is all about the divine definition of you, and that all of this other stuff here is not bad, wrong, shameful, to be judged, to be thrown out the window, to be castigated. I'm not about any of that type of stuff, but it is simply not the truest version of you. I have my piano set up here today so that I can play with music and teach you with music. Wait, I'll go to my face and I'll say, let's say that we are trying to go to this note here, which is a C. But you don't know exactly, like that's like the center C of your life. But you're like, okay, like I'm definitely going to try to go for that infinity timeline where I am an infinite being, where I'm experiencing infinite levels of consciousness, where I am God, where I'm present with God, where I'm present with infinity, because it means that you haven't lost your connection or forgotten or any of those types of things. But most of us are flying blind, unable to read the musical score of time, unable to know exactly which direction to go and what behavior patterns to follow and what to do, what do I do in order to get on that path of least likelihood. So mostly our experience has been, now I'm going to start all the way down at the end of the piano. That's not the right note. You can hear it. That's like when you were born and you died 1 second later. Still not right. Still not right. Still not right. You're doing game over, try again. Game over, try again. Game over, try again. Moving up the scale. Still not right. Oh my goodness. Very, you can tell. Not even close. Not even close. Not even close. Those are not the right versions of you. I'm getting closer. I'm sounding more and more like myself. I'm kind of more like myself. I look and feel a little bit more like my true self. I'm almost there. And then you find that you're actually there, right? And then it's the true version of yourself. But the whole point is, on a piano, there are 88 keys. And every time you are asked to play a particular note in a song, as a musician, you're not supposed to feel around and be like, is it this one? No, is it this one? No, it's not that one. This one? No, not that one. You're not supposed to have to use process of elimination to go through all of the wrong pathways until you finally get to the right pathway. But that is what has been happening in the way that our journey through the chakra system and through time and timelines has been set up. And this is because of genetic degradation and loss of pure insight. So the idea that you have to circulate around over here and then die, circulate around over here and then die, circulate around over here and then die, here. You're like trying to do a math problem by process of elimination. So literally, each one of these dots here is the end result of the calculations of your life, of your existence. If you could say 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 + 5 + 5 billion + 6 billion equals this dot here. You could also think of these as hard drives or recordings. Like, I am moving through time, I'm making a recording in my life of everything I've ever seen and felt and done and experienced and been through. And then that recording is held in the last moment of my life. So what you can imagine then is that all of these timelines, all of these lollipop sticks can be erased. I'm using my eraser now. And you can erase away all of those. They are there by implication. Oops, I erased one of the dead people. Let's put the dead guy back. Here. Oh, now I'm trying to draw with the wrong thing. Hold on a minute. This. Draw with the dead. There's the dead you. Okay. So yes, all of these, the membrane of death is literally plastered with the frozen moments of you in your moment of death, like a bug splattered on the windshield. I know that's not a very pleasant thing to think about, because none of us like to think of ourselves as being dead, but that is literally what all of this membrane of death is made out of. But when you die, and you here you died as a little child, a tiny infant, and you circulated up to here, and here's the moment of death that you were here. What happens is, that's like a sweater. Like, here's your genetic sweater, right? It's shaped like a little sweater. And what happens is all of the DNA gets unfurled. All of that potential yarn gets turned back into a ball of yarn. And then that yarn goes back to the beginning. So these versions of you that are here, they dissolve. They don't stay there endlessly. And that's a big one, because we don't want to have consciousness residing or staying in these areas where I'm highlighting in blue. That makes blockages like arterial blockages. The energy that is circulating from infinity and the source here, it's supposed to go down, out, around, and then back in a big loop. And if there's a big chunk of something stuck here, then that slows down and impedes the flow of time and consciousness. I'm going to go to my face so that I can talk with you more about this. That's a big part of what I teach about in this class. Pedro, I don't know if he's in this class or if he catches these archives. He's a lovely person who was in my class for many years. And he joked about game over, try again. And also we made up the joke called the pooties, pesky occupiers of the interstices, the idea of consciousness residues, the things that once were circulating around in the time vortex here were redefined as alive, and then got to the membrane of death and didn't dissolve quickly. That there are still some consciousness residues that reside in those areas that are supposed to be like a hallway or a transitory zone, but instead they have stayed there for a very long time, even set up whole civilizations that could be considered astral or ethereal or interdimensional or semi-dimensional, non-corporeal, but once were corporeal consciousness residues. And to them, the flow of love, because that's really what the membrane of death is. It is a flow of love. The love tone, the loving energy flowing along that membrane is what dissolves the genetic sweater in its incorrect state, the wrong notes, into pure potential again, so it can circulate back to the beginning and try again. But again, all of that trial and error is due to genetic degradation and loss of insight. When you have your insight correct and the way that everything used to be in the good old days, or in the concurrent old days of Atlantis, or I call it the sophisticated antediluvian realm, when you circulate it out, we'll use a nice bright color, you circulated out from infinity and you went directly to here. You're like, boom, I know exactly where to start. And then you circled directly up, 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 and you never went askew. You never went to the side. You never had a gutter ball in terms of bowling for your lifetime, bowling for your life. Ascension was inevitable. Everybody ascended. And because all of these peripheries were avoided, everybody was their true self. Everybody experienced only their true events on their lifetime. Everybody made it to infinity. It was a completely different level of experience. And that was due, again, to being able to see clearly and then having full use of your willpower. The stuff that gets stored up here, I'll go to my face so I can kind of gesture. It destabilizes the chakras. So each one of these vortexes is a chakra on your body. Your chakra system is a holistic whole. It is like a set of interlocking gears or wheels that all rest upon one another. So if you have one that is out of kilter like this, and that way it's going askew instead of aligning with that God, ascension, infinity timeline, it means everything else is going to wibble wobble. And also your chakras move. So it's not just the sense of like, it is stuck like this and it is always going to be like this. A lot of the time, these things move and oscillate. It's a wobbliness instead of a stableness, stability. And the stability, like all the paintings that I draw them as perfect anatomy of a person who is perfectly healthy, with every single chakra is in perfect alignment with their divinity pathway, because I'm trying to exemplify that and teach that to others. If we had a real-time picture of what most of the chakras look like in this world, it would be like, this one is kind of askew, and then this one goes kind of askew, and then this kind of askew, and then this kind of askew, and then this wobble kind of goes all the way down and all the way around. The wibbly wobbliness of time, which is not necessarily a positive thing, in that it means instead of being focused like a laser on that one path of least likelihood that allows you to exit through the wormhole and exit this reality and return to infinity, it's the hunting around on the keyboard. Is it that note? No, it's not that note. No, it's not that note. Oh, that's the note I was looking for. But meanwhile, all of these other wrong notes are played musically. That's no judgment or anything like that. We're moving towards virtuous virtuosity, where you can see exactly which timeline you need to be on. I need to drink a glass of water. Hold on a moment. Thank you for understanding. Exactly which timeline you need to be on, and stay on it, and stay on it in stability. Let's say I use the analogy of your eyesight. In your eyes, let's draw it. Let's draw pictures. I talk with pictures. Get my magical pen. In your eyeballs, on your retina, so here's your eyeball. Here's the lens of your eyeball. Here's the white part of your eyeball. Here's the nerve at the back of your eye. So wait, here's your iris. Here's your pupil. I know I drew a rather astigmatic shaped lens, but understand that this is the cornea, the lens. This is the cornea of your eye. And then of course you have a lens back here. Light comes in and it hits this over here, which is your retina. And in your retina, you have all these dots. And all the dots are tiny receptors. And in one area of your retina, you have a focal point, the fovea, that there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of receptors. And that is the place where all of this light focuses so that you can actually see. That's a light cone focusing on your retina. But of course, you get a little bit of light falls over here in this periphery. A little bit of light comes over here in this periphery. That is exactly what we have going on in this diagram over here. This is your focal point. That's your fovea. That's your connection to divinity, to God, to infinity, to the source, the destination, to the everythingness that you are. All of these other timelines over here where I'm scribbling, that's all the periphery. Peripheral selves, peripheral possibilities, stuff that exists, but that you should not really be focusing on. Focus completely in terms of your journey on this central core timeline, because that's the only one. See, we're going through the wormhole at the top instead of hitting into and crashing into the membrane of death. It can be incredibly frustrating to have to go through the death experience. It will make you weary. Oh, I'm so weary. I had to go through all of these wrong notes to finally get to the right note. Hooray, I finally made it. And then when you do that, then you do it again in another vortex. So let's draw a pink vortex up here. Here, you have another vortex up here that's smaller, and you're starting at the edge again, and you're like, oh, now I'm going to circulate through. But if you get good, then you find out how to start in the central core area, first position, and go directly up and go all the way through in a way that you don't have to play all the wrong notes. Let's talk about what this is like on the anthropomorphic first person experience level. So I just gave you an abstract sense of what your energy body is doing as you move through time. In your life, I'm certain that each one of you has had the experience of cautionary signals coming from your peripheral selves. It might be in the sense of like an intuition or a gut feeling. I'm grabbing my tummy down here. My guts told me I needed to make a better decision, or my guts told me, don't get in that car, or don't go down that dark alleyway, or don't do that thing because it's going to end in disaster or catastrophe, or even a mild frisson, like just even a mild sense of like, maybe I shouldn't move into that neighborhood, or maybe I shouldn't take that job, or maybe I shouldn't go out on that first date with that weird guy that asked me out. Just a mild little tingle that tells you like, don't do it, because that's, you actually have explored in a parallel reality all of those dead ends, and you love yourself. And you are giving signals to yourself in the central core timeline to help keep you on your path, to say to yourself, don't focus on this stuff over here. And it might also be something big, like don't experiment with that drug. Like someone offers in high school, like, hey, like want to sniff or an injection of this. And the parallel version of you that ended up becoming a homeless drug addict will say to you, don't do it, don't, like echoing from the sides. And you can hear it in your heart and you can feel it in your guts. And when you listen, you avoid misery. when you listen to the signals that come from those parallel versions of self, you are able to avoid or diminish, I need to drink again, diminish your misery or diminish the suffering or diminish the death, and stay more in alignment with who you really are and play fewer wrong notes on the piano. So that's a big part of learning how to navigate this time field. So I have one friend, this is an old story from when I lived on the East Coast in Woodstock, but I was telling her about these concepts and she was like, oh yeah, she had a very clear experience one time. She used to be rather whatever outre as a young person. She would hitchhike everywhere. And this was also like a different time, you know, the 1970s. And she was at some truck stop and she had been hitchhiking and some guy was like, yeah, like I'll give you a ride to blah, blah, blah place. And she said she went into the bathroom and she was just like, you know, doing something simple and she was washing her hands and she was getting ready. And then she had this really clear sense of herself, like dead in a dumpster, like that's all, just dead in a dumpster. And she was like, oh, she got the cautionary tale from herself on the periphery. And she said she didn't even go back into the truck stop. She jumped out the window. She went out the bathroom window, just like a Beatles song. And she, you know, whatever, got away from that person and that experience. These are in some ways a survival mechanism in time, beyond the survival mechanism of being able to see objects like there's a lion behind that bush and it's going to chase after me and it's going to get me. It's the survival mechanism of having your inner eye activated and being able to sense what's coming in the future. So in that person's case, it's a rather extreme cautionary case. But you can imagine what it would be like in the antediluvian realm, where every single decision of your day, you are able to assess in terms of, does this keep me on the divine pathway? Does this keep me on this path of least likelihood? And I keep calling it the path of least likelihood because if I go back to this bullseye viewpoint, go back to the whiteboard, man. This bullseye viewpoint, where's my cursor? Where I'm scribbling my cursor over here, this spot over here. If we go back to there are, oh, come on, I wish this thing would work. Boom. There are so many different timelines that are bundled and clustered around the periphery, around the edge, but there's only one timeline where I'm making the pink dot in the middle, only one timeline that goes up the center. It is the least likely of all of the timelines in terms of probability. It might be 16 billion versions of you that die to one, the one version of you that aligns with yourself as divinity and is able to reconnect to infinity. So it is the least likely pathway. But also please understand that very unlikely things happen in terms of the spiritual journey. And all of this, so I recorded all of this stuff in 2013, 2014. And I did it after 2012 because everyone thought December 21st, 2012, like we're all gonna like go somewhere and do something amazing and everything is gonna evanesce. And then we were all like, well, like I'm still here, still buying toilet paper. I know there was disappointment, but I really felt like we went halfway through a portal or halfway there and then had a lot more work to do. And now we're in this culminative moment, getting towards the culmination of moving through that wormhole. And the idea is, what is personal ascension? It is when all of your individual timelines click and you align with that particular timeline that does not end in an inevitable death. That's what I keep trying to tell everyone in this generation now, in you, everyone who I'm talking to, have the option and the opportunity to not have to die, even though many times people align with the concept of death as freedom. Like that's how you're going to be free. That's how you're going to get the F out of here. There's a lot of difficulties and struggles and suffering associated with being alive. But I'm trying to tell you, like, if you hit the membrane of death, you're going to have to circulate through again until you find your right pathway. If you play a wrong note, that's not the right note. That's not the divine note. That's the divine note that you're looking for. So death is a non-divine note. None of this, again, is even any kind of aspersion or criticism or judgment of anybody who's died, because many, many good people have died. But let me draw it as a time vortex. What happens is your life here now overlaps with the version of their life where they died, but not with their ascension timeline. So let's say here, I'll draw a completely different color, a green time vortex. Here's a green time vortex of, we'll name this guy Mr. Green. And Mr. Green has timelines that go over here, and that's the area of coincidence with the blue timelines over here. But there's not a complete overlap. So Mr. Green's beautiful ascension timeline over here, where he or she, that green person, is going through that time vortex up at the top, their divine perfection over here does not interrelate with this person's blue timeline over here. That's what it means. It means that very, very good people die because in the areas of coincidence over here, where your lives overlap and where your timelines can interact with one another, they were still exploring the wrong notes of time and they didn't quite hit the right notes of time. So what is a big thing, and I was talking with Brooksy, who's in this class, in a session about this, about questions of ascension. The question of, if I align in this moment, in this timeline, in this body of who I am now, what about my past timelines, my past lives? Past lives, meaning I was a person, like if you think you were someone famous like Cleopatra or Van Gogh, you died and then you lived another life. But Cleopatra has a version of reality where she didn't die. She made it through the wormhole. So did Van Gogh. Van Gogh has a version of reality where he never shot himself in the cornfield, after deep depression, and then, it was posthumously celebrated. Everyone has, even every historical figure, every human being who's ever lived, every organism that's ever lived, has as their potential inside of themselves that central core timeline that is God, that is God's self. And they don't all overlap. In fact, they array all around like this, like a dandelion seed head. So there's that central zeroth dimension and all of these vectors of lives that all spread outward from there, so that you might not overlap with the other versions of yourself as God that are eternal and that know it and that return to self as God, because your overlapping areas of timelines are the versions of you that actually died or hit the membrane of death. So that is the mountaintop vista perspective of multidimensionality that we're moving into. If it's confusing, I'll keep on describing it and you'll get there. But the basics of this are that when you make realignments with the chakras of your body, here now in this body, you are affecting all of the other lives and lifetimes that you've ever lived and all of the ones that you ever will live, and also affecting other people around you too. That the planetary, or let's say the group ascension and the individual ascension are very much tied together. This is why I also tell you, don't be afraid to be like, miss the bus. Like, am I going to miss the ascension bus? You're not going to miss the ascension bus, because your ascension is inevitable. It's baked into who you are, and it is baked into who you were across all these other lifetimes and lifespans. And as you are aligning yourself, click with your own divinity, all of your other versions of self and aspects of self are also similarly aligning themselves. Yourself, the language fails at this point. Self is also aligning in all those other times and places with divine presence. So the ascension that we're experiencing here now, personal and group, is also personal and group ascension of all consciousness everywhere at all times. It is an amazing thing to begin to think about. Like, you start to go wah, 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 like the scale is just incredibly, incredibly large. I want to go back a little bit to the fourth and the fifth dimension, because this also fits with language and languaging and the things that people are talking about so in 2013 and 2014, not that many people were talking about the fifth dimension and what exactly it is. And now I want to be a little bit more impeccable with our language. Let me just erase this eyeball and make some room over here. So I drew this blue timeline and I said that's the fourth dimension. And then what is perpendicular to the blue timeline is, oops, draw it with a drawer. Going in this, now this thing. I'm clicking work in this direction. That, oh good, T came in. That would mean that you're lining up many, many possible timelines next to one another. But I also want you to think in less literal terms, in terms of lines and potentialities. I want you to start thinking of waveform potentials. So if you've got this as a timeline, think of it like a long, skinny French bread, right? Where like, here's one end of the loaf of bread is your birth, and here's one end of the loaf of bread is your loaf of bread. The loaf of bread begins here at birth and it goes over here to death. And then here's all of the wonderful slices of baguette in the middle that we can use to make some bruschetta or something like that. The fifth dimension is the bakery, where the bread is baked. So I know that I'm giving to you this postulate of point, line, plane. You start with the 0th dimension, you go to a line that's the 1st dimension, you line them up and make a plane that's the 2nd dimension, then you stack them up again, make a box, which is essentially another point, that's point, then the boxes go in a line, that's a line, then the lines go together on a big giant plane. That's all accurate and that's all math talk and it's all really good. Drinking a little bit more of my beautiful structured water. I encourage everyone to structure your water. And there's a more expansive, more informative way of understanding what the 5th dimension is. The 5th dimension is the bakery where the bread is baked, and it is the constituent elements that make up bread. So a long, skinny French bread is one timeline that you can be on and that you can experience. But literally, the 5th dimension is a sea of batter or uncooked dough. And it is waveforms, just the potentials of waveforms. And when you look at that dough with the ovens of your eyes, which shoot out quantum observership, you bake that dough into actual moments of experience that you can live, that you can eat, that you can embody and that you can be a part of. So the actual experience of the 5th dimension is an experience of formlessness, that it is a place of pure potential, the uncollapsed waveforms, the pure potential of bread, of reality that can actually be baked into something. I have a really nice recording of this that I did sometime in 2015 or 2016. It's on YouTube. It's about reality cookies. And it's about exactly this. I use cookies or bread as the example. And each cookie or each slice of bread, it's a moment in time. So you have to understand time is completely subjective. We have watches and clocks and clock towers and digital clocks and atomic clocks and everything that is the non-natural measurement of time. And then we have our natural subjective experience of time, which is actually more accurate. Sometimes time flows fast. You're like, that went by so fast. That couldn't have been an hour. Sometimes you're like, that was the longest, most tedious hour of my whole entire life. And it felt like 10 years. Your subjective experience is more accurate than what the clock on your watch is telling you. This is about reality cookies. So if you're baking each moment of reality out of the 5th dimensional dough, sometimes you leave that dough in the oven a little bit of time and it's done. Sometimes you leave it in the oven a long amount of time. If you put all of these lumps of dough in the oven and it's a giant industrial oven and everything gets cooked at the same amount of time, you end up with burnt cookies. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can't industrialize time or make it, cookie cutter, make everything completely regular and completely predictable, because it is not completely regular and completely predictable. It is subjective. So sometimes time flows fast and it seems to go by very fast. And there's that William Blake poem, to see eternity in an hour, like to see infinity in a grain of sand and eternity in an hour. That's very apt. And what that has to do with your inner metabolism of energy, how fast you are moving internally, determines your subjective experience or rate of time. So the faster that you're moving internally, the more eternity you fit into one moment. And then the slower that you're moving internally, the less eternity you fit into one moment, and the more that it becomes something that is smeared out over many, many moments. So all of this is like, I am not a huge advocate for molecular explorations or psychedelics or anything like that. So don't misinterpret me, but I'm not a judge. So you do what you want to do with your brain chemistry, but I don't do it for myself for a variety of reasons. Because my brain is, I'm already tripping, but also my brain is rather fragile. Like I don't need to put extra chemicals into it. But all of that being said, there are some people that have had experiences upon ingesting certain molecules where an hour's worth of regular clock time can feel like 13 hours or, whatever, 24 hours. The whole idea of DMT is that it was called the businessman's trip, because it would, in the span of a half-hour lunch break for the businessman, that you could have a whole entire psychedelic voyage that might feel like 24 hours or however long, but within 1 hour or half hour of objective clock time. Again, I'm not advocating, but I'm also not judging for any of this. So just don't misinterpret me. But the whole idea is those molecules like DMT and other things, those are endogenous brain chemicals. We have them inside of ourselves. So there are hormonal structures that we release ourselves that change our subjective experience of time and make us at times feel like time is flowing very fast or time is flowing very slow. And some of them are joy and bliss chemicals, and some of them are like psychedelic connection chemicals, and all of it has to do with the activation of your pineal gland and your eye of insight. I mean, it's just, you're a miracle in your physical body, or supernatural being in your physical body, just walking through your day. But most of us have been trained and acculturated. Like when you go to school, a large part of your training is ding, now it's time to eat. Ding, now you get a bathroom break. Ding, now it's time to do this work. And then we get used to that because that is training in preparation for being a good worker in the workforce, where ding, now it is time for you to drive to your job. Ding, now it is time for your coffee break. Ding, now it is time for you to do this business meeting. Ding, now it is time for you to whatever, go clean up and go home. So all of that regularity of time has been a falseness that has been placed on top of humanity, that of course we conform to because food is a great motivator and you got to get money for food, but it's not truthful. So when you start, then for some people it's like, yes, finally when I retire, then my time is mine, or having a different way to structure reality even before retirement, to be more in control of one's time and more in control of one's experience of time. That is real freedom. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about creating a new earth and moving into a new way of being and changing and redefining our social structure, economic structure, and consciousness structure. That when you are in alignment with that central core timeline, it doesn't mean like poof, like I poofed away and I'm no longer here, but it does mean that you're on the timeline where you will exit the wormhole. But it like that's what you would see if you looked through your eye of insight through the windshield down the road. That's where we're going, down the road. But you're still here, but you're still having experiences, but your subjective qualitative experiences have a different quality of life than the ones when you are heading towards the membrane of death. When you're heading towards the membrane of death, it's a different experience of time. Sometimes it's this sense of anticipation, like I got to do this because I got to do this because I got to do this. I got my laundry list in my head. I'm jumping 10 steps ahead. I do that a lot. Like I have to go here, so I have to do this, or I have to do this, or I have to do this. And like I feel myself heading towards the membrane of death. It is time to redirect myself back into that central core timeline, which feels more like being in a perfect flow state, in a perfect alignment state, in bliss, moving towards these inevitabilities, even while I go through my day and go through things. So what I was just sharing there, that's not actually part of the recorded lessons, but is part of the augmented live stuff that is about what we're going through right now. Because I didn't know in 2013, 2014, when I did this, what our ascension experience would be like here. But this is what it is. It is a redefining or redefining our relationship with time and what it is to be submerged in time and what it is to have a time body. And you start to experience greater levels of empowerment in navigating the time field. So you don't have to press the wrong notes before you find the right note in time. Everybody starts pressing the right note in time. And that's you here now, all of your future possible selves in other petri dishes, because you might have been a Lyran, like a lion person, or you might have been a Lemurian ancient human before even ancient Atlantis. You might have been any one of these types of beings that all had not time catastrophe, but let's say time inhibition. Everybody got changed in time. Everybody's chakras got wobbled around. Now everybody is getting click back into place and righted. And as that's what's the profound importance of what you're doing. You think I'm just this guy driving along and I drink my coffee and I use toilet paper and I drive in my car. Like, no, you're actually a very profound person. You have multiple parallel lives in this life, and you have multiple parallel existences in other time places. And your realignment of who you are here now is absolutely connected to and creating and radiating outward into all of those realities. The healing here now is the healing radiating outward into all of those realities. So the fifth dimension is like the musical score of the cosmos. If you're looking to play, you're gonna play that note, but you're like, okay, like how do I even know that I want to play that note? How do you know that you want to play a note in a musical song? You can read music. That's the whole point. When you start to get your insight online or open, or your, higher faculties are functioning, you're able to see, sense, and experience what is coming and what is expected of you and what note you're particularly supposed to play in your life. And this is so different than flying blind. I don't blame anyone for going up and down the piano scale. No, wrong note, wrong note, wrong note. Like, should I be a doctor? No. Should I be a lawyer? No. Should I be a candlestick maker? No. Like, what should I do? What should I do with my life? Like that, nobody knows what to do with their life because this insight has been inhibited. Like, you're not supposed to live like that. You're supposed to just like, what would it be like if you couldn't see? And I also joke, not joke, but like say lightheartedly, that people are like Roombas, you know, those floor sweeping robot machines that go around people's houses. And like, I'm a little Roomba, I'm going in this direction, and I'm sweeping the floor. And then I hit an obstacle or I hit the wall and I bounce off of it. And I go in this direction, bounce off of it, bounce off of it. A lot of people's thought structures are that way too. They're like Roomba robots. Like I go in, I think in this direction, boom, I hit an object. Now I will bounce off of it, go in a different direction. Boom, I hit an object, go in a different direction. I don't blame anybody because there's a lack of perception. Lack of perception. You don't know which direction to go. You follow a path, kind of feel your way along. And then you're like, oh, that's the right person. Even in terms of relationships, not knowing who you're supposed to be with in life, not knowing who you are supposed to be as a person, not knowing who you're supposed to be with as a person. Everything, when you can see with your insight, is divinely guided and evident, where you're like, oh, I know exactly where to go and exactly what to do and exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to play that note and go there. That's reading the musical score of the cosmos. So understand right now, we all look like we're sitting in rooms. You think I'm sitting in my room here with my paintings behind me, but I'm not. I'm sitting in a field of possibilities and probabilities of uncollapsed waveforms. And as I use the ovens of my eyes and of observership, I am taking these potentials of the bakery of life and turning it into actual moments, actual physical experiences, actual time cars of reality that I then jump into as I'm jumping my consciousness from moment to moment. All of you are doing the same exact thing. The challenge is to do it not on a sub or unconscious level, but to do it on a conscious and super conscious level. You could think of it like Superman, but also super in being higher than your higher self, doing it on a higher self level, knowingly saying there's these potentials in the music of life, and I am going to intentionally collapse these moments into experienced waveforms and then step into them and experience them. That is conscious co-creation, because remember, you're the divine creator and God and infinity, and you thought the thought, what would it be like if I wasn't actually with myself at infinity? And you made it out here into the world of matter, and now you are on the journey going back to what would it be like if I reconnected with myself and we had a giant homecoming in terms of remembering who I am, remembering where I came from, remembering why I came here, and bringing back all of the treasures, all of the spiritual treasures, all of the insights that you gained from this experience. That was what I was starting off this class with. It's not something random or silly, like, oh, I'm so silly. Why did I ever go away from myself? No, you went away from yourself for a purpose, and that there's a value to separating yourself from infinite self and being individuated. And then as you reconnect to infinite self, you're like, I remember that I'm infinite self. And then I also remember what it was like to be finite self, to be this little old me driving along, drinking my coffee, going to the store, going to my job. And that I tell everyone, that level of your being, your finite self, is valuable, is worthwhile. Your journey here in material matter is profound, is special. Think of yourself as, and your journey and what you're doing in every moment as being incredibly special. People sell their time for money, like it's the commodification of time, where you have, I'll sell 1 hour for $10 or 1 hour for $20. It's just the way it is in the world of commerce and getting by. However, I love the work of Jose Arguelles. He's not on Earth anymore, but I'm sure he has an ascension timeline, but his ascension timeline does not overlap with my ascension timeline here. So to my viewpoint, he has died and passed on and doesn't have a body on Earth anymore. But he wrote some really wonderful good books. And in one of them, he wrote about time. Instead of time is money, he said time is art. And that is truthful, that every single moment that we are experiencing in terms of being submerged in time and the collapsing of waveforms and our interactivity with time itself and other organisms, is an art form and not something that could be commodified and sold for cheap, not even for $10 an hour, not even $20 an hour. To be like $10 million an hour is what your time is actually worth. But of course, we live in this world, and that's not the world of commerce. So I'm looking at my notes here. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize, and I've got it emphasized in my notes, that central core timeline is your infinity timeline. It's the one upon which you do not die and you travel infinitely. And that means you've come from the source, you've emanated outward, you're in material matter, you circulate back to infinity. But that doesn't mean that you just then like, now I'm sitting here at infinity, like doing nothing, going nowhere. No, it is an endless circulation, an endless moving. It is eternal life. And that life is, let's call it a momentum. You're not just in stasis. Even as you achieve infinity, which would be considered the ultimate stretching of the stretchy fabric of time, space, and consciousness. So you've stretched out the fabric of consciousness to an infinite amount of stretchiness, and you're at that point of stretchiness, but it doesn't mean that you're just like stuck in place, doing nothing or going nowhere. There is a motion or a momentum or a volition or a beingness to it. It's the infinite journey, and it's eternal life, and it never stops, but it is definitely different and defined differently than the linear life in time that we are learning. We're right now, we're in linear time, like I get up in the morning, then I have lunch, then I have dinner, then I go to bed. That's linear time, and linear time also goes in cycles. But the infinite timeline, when you're at infinity, is a different type of motion, but still a type of motion. It's not death. And I also want to make it very clear that these chakra systems and their central convergence points are not prisons. This is not like some kind of a roach motel where you got into dimensionality and now you're circulating endlessly, like endless, timeless, back to infinity, back to infinity. People here are skeptical, and it's worthy skepticism because you like read the brochure, you're like, yeah, go be in dimensionality, experience time. This sounds awesome. I'm there, I'm going to do it. And you got a body, and then you did the karmic washing machine through many lifetimes, through many deaths, many times hitting the membrane of death and go circulating, game over, try again. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. I'm so exhausted just thinking about it. And of course, I'm facetious when I act in that way, but it's fun. I'm being lighthearted. Get threadbare sometimes going through the washing machine so much. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be a woohoo ride, like, woohoo, I got born, woohoo, I lived these lives, woohoo, I reconnected with God. It's supposed to be like that, not this real ennui and boredom of like, oh, another time loop. Oh, we're doing this again. Oh, we really have to go through this again. Because I talk with some people who are very mature or whatever, old ancient souls, and they're like, yep, I've done this 10 million billion times, going through it again, time looping again. And that's not, it's just, it can be very wearing on the soul. And I'm walking and I'm new and I'm like, woohoo, like everything is new and interesting. And I'm like, I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to buy tomatoes and cucumbers. And that's like interesting to me. But it's like, if you've done the tomatoes and cucumbers at the grocery store 10 million lifetimes, then it's just like maybe not that fascinating. So I understand and respect. But to me, there's a lot of novelty, but it's not meant to be a prison. Please understand that you're not meant to view this endless journey as a type of imprisonment where you're like, oh, I'm circulating endlessly through the chakras, and how in the world do I get out of here? And you think, I'll get to infinity and then I'll get out of here. But it's just like, oh no, now I just have to emanate again and I have to do this again. It's not supposed to be that way. So understand, like, if you ate rotten food and then you're like going to expect like it's always going to be that way. No, you just had a bad sandwich. You had a bad experience, but this is actually supposed to be a freedom, the infinite journey, while you are knowing that you're God, while you are knowing that you're on your journey, while you're knowing that you're connecting with all of these levels of consciousness and self. It's supposed to be celebratory and fantastic, not drudgery and toil. All right. Okay. I got through this concept, the idea of simplifying the time vortex. So if you have the time vortex like this, all these timelines that are heading up to the membrane of death, we can erase actually all the stuff that's in the middle here, all the goop, everything except for that tent pole, everything except for the central core timeline. That's the tent pole, just like a circus tent that is holding up these membranes of death. Everything else is there by implication. And everything that's on the membrane of death, those are all your hard drives. And let's also talk about this. I need to drink more. Being a real-time broadcaster for the sun and the stars. Mostly due to the implantation of the verbalized mind, everybody accumulates their hard drives and then hands it in on the moment of death. It's kind of like handing in your homework for the entire semester. Like, I saved it up in a folder, but I didn't hand it into the teacher. Teacher is the sun star. It's in our sky. And it's also the whole network of suns and stars everywhere. Points of consciousness, great neurology of light. That is absolutely what we are. Oh, Melissa, hello, welcome. Don't worry about being late. Don't worry about it at all. And everything is archived so that you can check it out later. But welcome, I'm happy that you're here. The great teacher in the sky that you are writing your term paper of your life for is the sun. That's our nearest broadcaster, that's our nearest teacher, but it's also the entire network of stars. And what you're supposed to do is be live casting in a real-time broadcast, that because you are light, everything that you've got in your body is made out of light. The calcium in your bones came from an ancient star. All of your food stuff and everything that sustains you here comes from your current star. Everything is about knowing that your matter, that you are, is slowed down light. With all of this, you could call it borrowed light or light that's on consignment. Like, you're using this light for a little while and it's personally yours, but it's also part of this much larger network. What you are not obligated to, but like reciprocal, you're reciprocating in sending back your experience as a real-time broadcaster. You're submerged in time, you're using all this light, you're having all this experience of embodiment and being separated or individuated. And what you are supposed to do is send back a real-time broadcast. And the real-time broadcast has only been interrupted slightly due to genetic degradations of humanity, which again is insight going down as genetic degradations. Not a real-time broadcast with the sun is also genetic degradations. And a lot of it is also language structure. What prevents us from having a really great connection with the sun and the stars in real time is constantly talking, mental chatter, that whole implantation at the yellow level of our chakra system, which is a hacked human operating system. So many of our meditative practices are about reining in the mind and reconnecting to our formless mind, our mind of pure insight here, which is the pure language of light and of the stars, that we should be able to go through our day having experiences and have all of those sensory experiences quantum entangled, go directly to the sun as information in the moment, so that the sun that emanated us and the sun that has emanated all of these possibilities and probabilities that surround us in the fifth dimension and higher knows what we are going through. When you're in a cellular dead zone and you can't do your broadcasting to the sun is like, I know I sent out those photons. I know something is going on down there, out there, up there, in there. I just can't see exactly what it is. Then you hit the membrane of death and it's like handing in your hard drives or giving in your term paper. And then the sun is like, oh, now I finally got the information about what's been going on with you in your life trajectory. Too bad you are already dead, because now it is after the fact and I cannot actually do anything to rectify your journey. Like, if you were going like this and you're going to hit the membrane of death, if you get information, it's like, wait, now I will go like this. More information is like, oh, wait, now I will go like this. And you can keep on realigning through getting more information and more insight until finally, click, you're on the timeline where you don't have to hit the membrane of death. That is what my classes are all about. That is why I've been here for 20 years. That's why I've been here doing the flying rainbow lasagna. When I do this dance, what I'm doing is sending out rectification waves from the sun and the stars. I jump out of this dimensionality submerged posture into non-submergence, get a breath of fresh air, get that the fresh news of the day from the sun and the stars, and then jump back in here. And then that's not the end of my journey. Then I'm, of course, radiating like a guitar or like a piano, all of that energy and information out to everyone and everything here. It's why I'm here as a walk-in. I've described it as planting, coming here now to plant seeds in quote unquote the past that will reverberate forward into the future. But it's not just planting a seed, like one event that radiates outward. It's all of the music every day, all the time, that I'm bringing in from outside of the system or outside of the simulation that affects the people here. When you hear some of the ideas that I'm broadcasting genetically, instead of going in this direction, you're like, wait, my ship of my life just turned a little bit. And then the next day turns a little bit more. And then the next day turns a little bit more. And I've been here affecting humanity, individuals, and collective for 20 years with the specific intention of writing everyone, getting everything back in that alignment of the central core timeline. So part of it is intellectual ideas. I have this written down, wait, because I have it emphasized. But basically what I wanted to remember, do I have it? Yeah. Your thoughts and feelings are what determine if DNA is accessible or not. DNA is a direct connection to whether you're heading in this direction towards the membrane of time, or whether you are heading in this direction through the wormhole back to infinity. Your DNA is a bridge between your pure light body of potentials, possibilities, and probabilities, and your physicality, structure, and where you are in the boxes, in the tiny boxes moving through time, and what your body looks like and feels like and how your body acts. And what changes your DNA are your thoughts and feelings. When I talk to you and I give you, first of all, I give people emotional energy with my voice, and I give you just abstract energy with my beingness, with my existence. And lately I've been doing a lot of giving out energy with my music, and that's all part of this, part of why I do this. And I give out intellectual energy with words and thought structure. All of that is positive rectification waves or positive redirection. And it's meant to be in respect of freedom. Like, I didn't come here and be like, I will force you to go. It's like, I'm forcing you away from death. None of it is like that. It is the inevitability of interaction of energies. And it is meant to be consensual. So it's meant to respect your freedom. And it's also meant to also respect my freedom. That my freedom in life is, I'm going to embody, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to radiate these waves, and I'm going to do this lasagna dancing, knowing that it's going to affect the beings that are around me. And that is part of what is appropriate in terms of my existence as a higher dimensional being. I'm Aurora from Aurora Collective. I'm a collective, and I chose to come here distilled into this body and do this work of sending out rectification waves so that everything gets rectified, so that what would be considered the future or the out there presence gets righted also, or is restructured in a positive way also. Responsibility and a devotion to the whole, the entirety of the journey of photons of consciousness to be going in the right direction. So it's like a very linear way of saying, I came back in time to plant seeds so that the future would sprout and things would change different. It's kind of like that, but in much more accurate language structuring, which is hard because our language is not made for accurate descriptions and depictions of time. What I did was, every day I jump out of here all the time, vibrating in and out of reality to bring in fresh air into a closed system so that all of the energy beings that are going towards membranes of death have the opportunity to go towards instead ascension timelines and go up the central core timeline. And what determines whether you're like this or whether you're like this, a lot of it has to do with genetic behavior. Let's talk about genetic behavior now. And I have pictures and things like that. I'm going to show some. Let's show pictures. I took the time to take them out of my folder. Let's show you pictures. I'm going to do share screen right over here. Share my screen. No, you don't need to look at this. You don't need to look at this. You need to look at this. So this is one thing, and this is another thing. These are your DNA. Wait, this one should be showing. This one should be on top of this. And then that's in the background. That's that picture. That's a screenshot from the video that Eleanor was asking about. Can I move this so you can see it better? Good. So what you can see here, I'm highlighting. Oh, good. Here's a thing I could talk with. This is DNA, and it's a pretty good representation, like an artistic representation, but a pretty close one to what your DNA is actually shaped like, because you can see there's close together over here, and then a bigger groove, a major groove and a minor groove, just like music is groovy, get it? So there's a major groove and a minor groove. And what you're looking at here are threads of DNA. So this is one strand that is a thread that is like a waveform that's put together in a linear fashion that gets wrapped around this guy over here, which is called a histone. And in this diagram, these pink balls are what are histones. It's a type of protein. So you could think of it as a thread that is wrapping around a spool. And the DNA wraps around the spool, and then it goes on its journey. And then it wraps around this spool. And then you can see back here, wraps around this spool. I'm not doing a perfect drawing, but when the DNA is doing these wrappings, it ends up creating these torus shapes. Get a different color. So here's DNA that's wrapped around, wrapped around, wrapped around. Each one of those is a donut on its edge. I'm going to draw that's a donut. And then there's another donut in front of it. Donut is a torus. And any place where you have a torus or you have a donut, you can make a flying rainbow lasagna. So when you flying rainbow lasagna, you would now envision, let me get a better color. You would envision each of these tori, that's supposed to be the curly edge of the lasagna. And then here's the pointy edges. Oh, that worked terribly. Here, let me get a better color. No, go back. It's so hard when I like to draw things perfectly and it doesn't draw perfectly on the computer. Boom. Pointy side up to violet, the pointy side, the pointy side. So we're jumping over here and we're jumping over here. And what you end up having is a vibrating, overlapping series of lasagnas. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit in class, but I'll go into this more. So what you have are many tori stacked up like donuts that can then vibrate like lasagnas, creating new and interesting patterns. This formation here at this level of wrapping, which is called supercoiling. And I have all sorts of wonderful homework videos that I will share with you. Today, I'm going to go another about half an hour because then I'm going to have to prepare and jump in my car for my next assignment of the day. But this is still going to be lesson 2. And next week, we're still going to be doing lesson 2 because lesson 2 is so packed with goodness. I'm telling you, it just takes a lot. Oh, hold on a minute. Hold on. Let me just pause this because the kitty cat has jumped outside and now needs to come in my window. Pausing. Back to the picture on the whiteboard here. Oh, back to the share screen rather. Solenoids. So these DNA supercoiling, what you're looking at in this area over here where I'm scribbling my cursor, it's not my drawing. This is the wrapping of how you add energy to DNA to wrap it up into a chromosome. So you start off with one thread that is like a yarn. This is how you make the genetic sweater. Wrap it around these proteins that are called histones. Start curling it up into these multiple tori that it begins to be called a solenoid. Then those become these kind of daisy-like loops and chains, which then fit all together into the X-shaped chromosome. Let me move this chat room there. X-shaped chromosome that everyone is familiar with. This has everything to do with DNA being like a scroll. I've described it almost like a scroll, like a papyrus, where you have scrolls with information and they curl up like this. So what is the determinant factor of whether information that is dormant within your DNA is activated and exemplified in your life, or whether it remains dormant, has everything to do with the shape of your DNA. If the scrolls are unfurled, then the RNA messengers can read the information there and say, oh, here's this part in this book where it either says, build these protein structures or have this experience or live or behave like this. If it's all curled up, then those behaviors or genetic expressions or opportunities in life remain dormant. So everything about flying rainbow lasagna in your body as it applies to DNA. And again, I will get into much more details in future. This is just the tip of this is just your little lasagna appetizer. But begin to understand that DNA has behavior. It's not always in a chromosome shape. Inside of your cells, like if this is the cell membrane, then you have the nucleus at the center of the cell. Inside of that nucleus, much of the time, the DNA is unfurled. Like when you get to your destination, you unpack your suitcases, your socks go everywhere, your sweaters go everywhere, that's all over the hotel room. Everything is out so you can use it. That's what most of this stuff is like in your nuclei of your cells. Only when you are going to do the mitosis, which is the cell division, does everything get packed up tightly in these little X-shaped chromosomes, and then they split apart because they have to be like a spaceman in their spacesuit. Like get into your spacesuit because you're going to have to go someplace. But most of the time, these can be free-floating. They're vibrating strings. vibrating strings. This is an electric piano. One day I will have a grand piano that has actual vibrating strings. Wish it for me. But for right now, I love having my electric piano. But if I had a regular piano, it would have vibrating strings. Or you can imagine a guitar or a harp. Your body is an instrument. It is made of vibrating strings. These constant vibrations that are happening in the nuclei of your cells are creating reality, basically. And the reality that they create is beyond your protein structure, like this is the shape of my face, or these are how big my hands are, or this is how tall you are. Like, yes, that's genetic. Also, the events of your life are genetic. If we go back to the whiteboard and what I have drawn here with the boxcars of reality, come on, do the whiteboard. The boxcars of reality, what makes you jump from this body here to this body here is the wiggling, vibrating, oscillating motion of your DNA. That your DNA has behavior. It is not always packed up into its tightly coiled chromosome shape. It has a movement to it, and that movement is a dance, and you are literally dancing through time, bouncing here, bouncing here, bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. And when I talk about Flying Rainbow Lasagna being a dance, that is the type of dance that I am talking about. So I'm doing the Flying Rainbow Lasagna dance even right here now, even though you think, oh, Laura, you're just sitting there in a chair. No, I'm doing my dance right now. I'm doing it on a subcellular level. So often when you see me make these hand motions, I'm like, I do up, down, left, right, in, out, over, under. What I'm showing you with my fingers, and it almost feels like I'm touching time itself, is this sense of the plasticity or flexibility of genetic structure, of DNA. And DNA is a bridge connecting you directly to light. So understand, it's like by touching DNA and moving the DNA in your body, you're touching the world of pure light and pure time. DNA kind of has to splice itself apart because it's so coiled up so tightly. In order to unfurl the book and read what's inside of it, you have to cut it. So you make cuts, you open it up, furl it, unfurl it, do a backflip, twist it up into itself, make interlocking loops, unmake the interlocking loops, make wreaths, make those wreaths interlock like this, make them unlock like this, bring them all back together. It spews out like ticker tape, you know, an old-fashioned ticker tape stock reading machine. It spews out, it zippers together with itself, it unzippers itself. It zips together, it unzips. It does all of these amazing motions, dance motions, just as a regular matter of course, before you even begin to add Flying Rainbow Lasagna. And Flying Rainbow Lasagna is the next highest dimensional shape that you can make with your DNA that gives you greater levels of freedom. So all of these things I've been talking about today, like how come you can't just see through the windshield of your life and play the right note and know where in the world you're going and do things properly and not hit the membrane of death? The answer is because someone knit your genetic sweater in a way that doesn't look that good right now. No offense to anyone. But if you're heading towards the membrane of death, it means that somebody dropped a stitch somewhere, like knit 1, purl 2, we dropped a stitch, something is wrong. You're not quite knit together in the right way. And it is time to rectify. Oh, we'll go to the chat. I'm going to make sure that I answer people's questions. Melissa says DNA was a perfect natural technology because matter is needed in order for light to be seen and experienced. Beautiful way of putting it. Thank you. Really, really good insight and perspective that you just articulated there. Yes, I would say that DNA is itself is like a perfect type of natural technology, that it is kind of like a computer or kind of like a blockchain. It is a way of storing information over time, and it has behavior where it does things. It has its own innate intelligence. It has its own innate dance movements. And when you're dancing and grooving, you're feeling fantastic. And that's when also subjective time feels different. That's when you're like, oh, I can feel eternity in an hour. I'm William Blake. I can feel eternity in an hour. Time feels wonderful and you're in bliss and you're in a frictionless mental state where you don't even have to think. Or sometimes I'm an artist and I'm painting or making music and I'm like, the day has gone by. That can't have been 5 hours. Like I just was working on my project. You're in the flow, as opposed to, of course, sometimes we feel painful or difficult or fearful experiences where it's like, oh yeah, that seemed to take forever. Thank goodness, thank God that is over with. An hour felt like an eternity, trapped in hell. And that's also valid because what that means is during those moments on a timeline, your DNA was making these dance movements that were like, sending you towards the membrane of death. And each one of us, if we had total control over our lives, would be dancing in the blissful state. We have this social structure there where sometimes it's like, oh, now I have to go dig a ditch for $10 an hour, and my DNA is going to be like, I'm heading towards death. Like, I'm feeling really horrible, but you do it because you need that $10. So this is the basically the story of humanity, that we went from immortals that didn't need food and ate nothing but pure light into being mortals that need food and need light, and we've been controlled by a money structure because that's how you get food to eat. That is the solidification of the light. But we're heading into a different money structure, we're heading into a different food structure, we're heading into levels of personal freedom in terms of directly changing your DNA dance to be able to directly generate and create reality, when then you will not be a slave to objective materialism in any way. So please take heart in all of that. But I'm describing the world that we're moving out of, the old paradigm, in order to accept and celebrate the new paradigm. So as you learn to consciously dance your DNA, you can not only choose the timelines, like there's an array of timelines. Do I want to be on this timeline dancing over here? I don't want to dance towards the membrane of death. Let's dance over onto this timeline where I'm going in a better direction. Or perhaps you don't like any of the timelines. You're like, that one's crap, all crap timelines. What I'm going to do is rewrite the timelines. Flying rainbow lasagna means that you have the capacity to change the formation of timelines, which is like saying, I'm going to write something new. My pencil with an eraser. I give you a pencil with an eraser. That means you can write a new sketch of what can happen in reality, because DNA creates reality. It doesn't just create your eye color, blue eyes or brown eyes or whatever. It creates reality structures. So if you don't like your reality structure, you can erase the things you don't like and then write in the things that you do like, in terms of physical health and in terms of events in reality, and even in terms of larger scale events. Cheryl says, I'm so glad to hear that this topic will continue next week, because I have a personal experience involving an altered sense of time that I want to share with the class, but I need to put it in writing first. Cheryl, please do take the time. I'm really interested. Put it in writing and organize your thoughts. And yeah, I've only really done 2.5 levels of the 4 levels that are in lesson 2. So we're not even through all of it yet. And we've got about 15 more minutes left to go. Let me go back and read some more of these comments so that I don't go too far. This is from Eleanor. She says, I was wondering, the first leap before nothing other existed than the unborn timeless zero. Do you see it as actual or a narrative, or both and beyond? What a great question. That initial leap from the zeroth dimension into a point in any direction, in terms of the original expansion of consciousness, I see it as a literal leap, movement of energy, and also an expansion of consciousness. Because every time you think a new thought, you're like, I never thought of that before, but what if this is possible? Those what if moments represent an expansion of your reality, literally a branching of timelines, that as you think, what if this could happen? What's actually happening is, instead of just this one timeline going here, all of a sudden it spreads out into a whole dandelion head array. All of these things are possible now just from the what if. That's my role in planting these seeds or influencing human thought structure. I bring a lot of new concepts to people, and then they start to think, what if? And new branchings happen. It's literally like new neural branching. And she also says, what is the you that jumps from the time box to time box from moment to moment? That it's beautiful that you're asking these questions. More than okay. So going back to the jumping from box to box, who is the you? Who is the guy? Who is the guy or the girl? Who is this little red stick figure? Wait, not that. Let me make a jump. I just made a jump of this pink line. The pink line is you. It is your consciousness that is jumping from your meat container to your meat container. So this pink line, boom, 3 years old, 10 years ago, last week, today, tomorrow, the next week, on into infinity, boom, boom, boom. That whole little bouncing pink line is your consciousness. It is an abstraction. It is an abstract part of self. And that abstract part of self is the part of you that bounced from God, divinity, unity, consciousness, infinity, into beingness, materiality, and has been bouncing from the moment of your birth, from moment to moment, down the timelines, and will continue your journey too, because that's part of what this conversation is all about. You will be continuing to bounce in positive directions as you exemplify the truth of the infinite journey more and more. So it's an abstract impulse. Who you are, jumping from body to body, is an abstract impulse. And your body is the container for that impulse, but it also does nourish that impulse. So now we get into questions of chicken and egg, who created who and what created what. You initially were an impulse of consciousness. You materialized your body in your mama's womb. I'm a walk-in, so I had a different experience and I had to learn all about gestation, but you created matter. You didn't just, I joke about this, you're not just created out of like the pickles and the ice cream that your mom made during her pregnancy cravings. You know, like I'm a molecule of a pickle put together with a molecule of ice cream mixed up with a molecule of tacos and mashed potatoes, because that's what mom ate today. And that's what my body is made of. No, your body is made of matter. You know, as I've been talking about, living in a fifth dimensional and higher reality of pure waveforms, because the waveform potentials change. So right now, like I'm in a sea of batter and it's vanilla flavored batter, and the ovens of my eyes are baking vanilla cookies, and I'm going to eat vanilla cookies. But you know something? I just changed the batter flavor and I added cranberries and walnuts to it. Now it's cranberry walnut batter. That's the sixth dimensional viewpoint of it. The waveform potentials have changed. So that's the higher dimensional viewpoint of potentials. And then the higher dimensional viewpoint of potentials also changes when you're able to see on an even higher level. So you start to see all of the edits that have happened in time, all of the potentials that have changed, all of the ways that everything has shifted and morphed over time. And then, so it's just the levels of complexity become so high that it can be difficult for the embodied individual brain using organic computer to even comprehend what is happening on those levels. But it's all just understanding rewrites and refinement. We're in a refinery of consciousness. And that really what keeps happening is the potentials keep changing and consciousness keeps changing, and then our experience keeps changing. So I'll just use a fun example from that show, The Simpsons. There's one of the Treehouse of Horrors where Homer gets a magic toaster. Every time he makes a slice of toast, he changes time. Somehow it's connected to timelines. And it shows him like making toast and everything changes. Make another slice of toast, everything changes. Make another slice of toast, everything changes. It's kind of like that. Like the flying rainbow lasagna is part of that. And also the collapsing of waveforms is part of that. It's a sense of time's mutability. So I'm very big on non-determinism, deterministic fate and things like that. That's the sense of all timelines are already written, all scripts are already written. You are just having access to all of these things that are already set in stone, and then you're just the person experiencing them. And that's also the idea of genetic determinism or genetic fatalism, something that's fated, not deadly, but fated. And I talk about epigenetics in the recorded class. This is from 2014 or earlier. Understand that now epigenetics is much more widely understood and accepted. Back then, I was recommending the work of Bruce Lipton, which I still think is excellent, good, worthy work. If you want to know more from a science researcher, biological scientist type of perspective, check out the work of Bruce Lipton, because he talks all about epigenetics in the sense of human healing. And it's, I think, very worthy for anyone who's on the healing journey to understand that potentials for disease might be written into your DNA, but you do not have to activate or exemplify and experience those potentials, that you can fold them up. The folding process in DNA is called methylation. Some people have greater facility in methylation and detoxification than other people. This has to do with the MTHFR gene. So this also has to do with when some people are exposed to aluminum in various different products and medical procedures in our world, which I will not mention by name. Some people are able to detoxify their bodies more quickly and easily. Some people are not. This has everything to do with methylation of genes. And that also includes things like folate. People who are MTHFR have difficulties processing out the folic acid that is added as an enrichment product to many wheat products in this world. And it builds up and it can create joint problems and neurological and brain problems. But folate itself from spinach and other greens is processed differently and much more easily in the body. All of these have to do with methylation pathways. So just understand that everybody's DNA doesn't act the same way. You are bio-unique. Your dance is unique. And what I tell to everybody is the solution to you as the Rubik's Cube, as the puzzle of you, in order to achieve that ascension timeline and be divinely formed and perfect, is unique to you. Your fingerprint is unique. Your genetic structure is unique. Your trajectory through time is unique to you. It is not a one size fits all off the rack suit of clothes that is like, everybody must do this and everybody must do it in this way and you do it this way. Nope. There's different dances for different people. So you will have to figure out what works for you in terms of how your genes become restructured, how you reform your thought structure, your emotional structure, your interrelationship with time, your interrelationship with your multiple consciousnesses across time, because spoiler alert, all of you are all of you. All of you are all of me. I am you and you are me. All of us are the same person moving through different rates through time and bouncing off of each other. All of our journeys are honored in terms of recognizing everyone else's self. Spoiler alert, you also become the stars, that you have been emanating all of this light out to yourself and caretaking your own journey. And then at a certain point, you become a star and you become an emanator and you become the thing that is emitting the timelines that you once ingested and walked upon. So it's a beautiful, reciprocal, reflective journey. And that's also part of the much higher dimensional perspective or viewpoint in appreciating the complexity of what we're experiencing. Oh, I love what Melissa says, the leap from zero point to the first dimension could be called the birth of the first dimension. Beautiful, beautiful and well said. Someone also asked me recently in a private session, is the zeroth dimension analogous to 0 point as it is spoken about in kind of the new science that people are investigating now? And I had to say that there are analogies, but not a perfect confluence, because a lot of what people are looking for when they talk about 0 point is energy, an endless source of energy, an endless way for me to have more electrons flowing in a wire so that it can be less expensive and I can light my light bulb for less money per day. But when I'm talking to you about the source and this infinite journey and being infinity and being God, the divine, it's about something that is so much more than the physical pragmatic concerns and physical applications of being able to make your energy and electricity cost less. So please understand that when you start to really embody these concepts and understand how profound they are, your motivations and value system will change and expand and enlarge away from the purely pragmatic and mundane. How do I light my light bulbs for fewer cents, each month, fewer dollars per each month, into how do I connect more with my divinity? How do I influence reality and the consciousness, the continuum of consciousness in a more effective way? How do I heal the continuum of consciousness, become less about commodification and practicalities and more about quality of life and quality of journey? I have lots of things that I was going to go into that I don't know if I'm going to do all of it. Some of it is about the scientific viewpoint of the Big Bang as an expansion outward from a central convergence point. That's in the recorded lessons. I don't know if that's something super that I have to be talking about, but what I really want to talk about is the idea of the hyperspace being the room that contains the room. When we're really talking about the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension, we're talking about hyperspace, that the fourth dimension is like a French bread. And where is the French bread contained and what is it in and where is it? The answer is it's in hyperspace. It's in the room that contains the room. And that is really how we come upon the flying rainbow lasagna. So in the last few minutes, I'm just going to give you a taste of this. I'm going to go more into this in our next presentation. I go to the whiteboard and I'm going to clear everything away, or clear away at least some space. Oh, I have some space down here. If I X this out, here's a torus. And the torus has, of course, that's a cross section of the torus. This is the infinity point at the center of the torus. And when I'm talking about the room that contains the room, just as science has described a Big Bang, like the center, epicenter of everythingness, and then radiating time shells moving ever outward, and an event horizon that ends up on the membrane that is the outermost membrane, that's the membrane of now. Like where I'm wiggling my pen, that's the moment now. But science doesn't even recognize everything that's in front of the moment now. All of these potential shells moving out here, out here, out here, out here, like here's 10 million years in the future. Science does not even really recognize those potential futures. It just recognizes everything that has emanated up into this point. And that is a very limited viewpoint. When I'm talking about the room that contains the room, we take this this potential Taurus. Taurus has the potential to turn into a flying rainbow lasagna, and we place it in a context. Now I'm putting it in a third dimensional box because that's how we view rooms, right? A room that contains the room. I just put it into a place. It now has a reality structure where it is residing, as opposed to, just there's nothingness beyond the edge of the membrane. There's somethingness beyond the edge of the membrane. That is the cognitive leap that is necessary to begin to turn a torus, go back to a different color here, a torus like this, which has, of course, the time vortexes, and then there's more time vortexes here and here, to turn those into a flying rainbow lasagna, where you start to move this entire torus structure up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Or you could think of it as taking the central convergence point, this dot that's in the middle here, I'm highlighting it in purple, that source begins to jump up and begins to jump down. Or you could think of it in a different way. You could think that this stays put, your apparatus here stays put, but what you do is you take the box and you jump the box up and down, and then you still end up getting this amazing lasagna waveform shape. Wait, I'll get a better color so that you can see it better. So the lasagna waveform shape would be like, here's the ups and downs of the curly edge of the lasagna noodle, and then in purple, here's that purple dot up here, and here's the purple dot down here, and we end up having this kind of pointy inverted shape. That just as we had to have the cognitive leap from zeroth dimension into the first dimension, what would it be like if some of me was not with me and was instead over here? Another big cognitive leap in terms of going from Taurus to flying rainbow lasagna is the conception of the idea, what if there was some stuff beyond the edge of this membrane? What if this membrane was not the end of everything? What if it was something more? And what you're really doing when you do that, because this, your time vortex, your Taurus, who you are as a person, as a little encapsulated self, or the cosmos as here's the Big Bang, and then here's the, ever expanding time spiral into the event horizon of the moment now. What you're doing is creating like one cell. That's one cell of a somatic cellular structure. And the big expansion in your consciousness is when you start to think, well, wait a minute, maybe this is not the universe, like uni prefix meaning there's only one. Maybe there are other universes. Here's another Big Bang. Here's another cell of a larger body. Here's a whole giant organism that I'm a part of. That when you start to look at what is beyond the membrane, what you're looking at is other levels of reality, parallel realities, parallel universes that make up the cosmos, the cosmic whole. And that in looking at something beyond the lasagna, the room that contains the room, hyperspace, what you're looking at is a context that is analogous to understanding that you are one cell in a much larger multicellular organism known as time. And that leap of consciousness gives you flying rainbow lasagna, gives you an additional degree of freedom. I know I went through that fast. It was just meant to pique your curiosity and give you thought structures to think about and mull over as the week goes on. Watch the recorded videos because I talk about all of this. It's level 1, the initiatory level, lesson 2, and this is a lot of it from part 3, where I'm talking about these thought leap, cognitive leaps. That's the theme for today. I should have started off with this. Hello, everyone. The theme today is cognitive leaps, but I did it after 2 hours of talking. The theme today is cognitive leaps, the zeroth into the first dimension, the Big Bang. What if there's something beyond the event horizon? The torus. What if we place the torus in a context, that box, that room that contains the room? And yes, Melissa is reminding us today is solstice. So I'm going to take the moment to wish everyone a merry solstice, a beautiful time of the year. I'm wishing you so many blessings. It's the shortest days of the year when there's the least amount of light. So first of all, I'm positively beaming you some sunlight from Southern California, where it's beautiful and sunny. Wear a tank top in the wintertime. It's wonderful. But also in terms of consciousness, You know, I talked about how I jump outside of the simulation all the time and get fresh air and bring that light presence back in here and radiate it outward to others. That is what I'm also talking about. May you have access to light, consciousness, new ideas, new intelligence, data, information, the light that illuminates your path so that you can see your future, so that you can see which note on the piano you wish to play as an individual, as a community, human social collective, as ecosystems, as consciousness itself. May you have enough light to be able to be guided on your path, and also know that summertime is a real thing too. Wintertime is like the nadir, it's like the lowest, oh, like it's down here. But then we get to the peak also, which is all about, these are light waves. Light waves go up and down. So we're at this lowest level in the human season over here, where we have limited amount of light, and maybe people might feel more depression or hopelessness or confusion or disconnection. But know in your heart that summertime is inevitable, moving towards light, moving towards infinity, reconnecting with the divine. These antithetical experiences, like now it's like cold and dark and hard and grueling and like you could barely survive. But then there is this summertime of consciousness. Summertime of consciousness. Melissa says, love you all. Thank you, Professor Aurora and Cheeky. You are very welcome. You can see Cheeky is over here wearing a small sweater, staying warm in the wintertime. And Eleanor says, thank you for your light and wishes. Right back at you, Aurora. Thank you so much. Blessings also on a new place to live, finding it smoothly and moving in joyously. Thank you so much. I accept those blessings. I'm still apartment hunting. I'm still working on it. So, and that's also part of, I need to complete the recording for right now and move on because I'm on kind of a schedule for today. But I will say thank you to everyone who is here in person. Thank you to everyone who watches the recorded archive. And thank you to people who expose themselves to this information and are interested in learning more. I encourage you to enroll. So I don't have as much time for Q&A as I would like to today, but I will on other occasions. Like it's holiday hours at a place where I have responsibilities in the world. So that's where I'm going to go to take care of holiday hours. Thank you so much. Eleanor says, beautiful lesson. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I will return next week with the completion of lesson 2. And this has only been the level 1 stuff. So we'll get to advanced stuff too. Thank you so much, everyone.